Hello, friends. Today I'd like to read a couple of the recent Living Wisely, Living Well daily quotations from Swami Kriyananda's book that we share at the end of our morning meditations. So this is yesterday, January 27th, and today, January 28th. Both of them relate to our speech, which could be extended to our communication in words of any kind, whether in writing or whatever. But these are both helpful, and I'll just address a few thoughts to these. So this is January 27th. For clarity, edit, at least mentally, what you say or write, always placing emphasis on simplicity, directness, and rhythm. Convoluted sentences merely bewilder the mind. Clarity requires special attention. Try to think with others. Take into account also their varied levels of understanding. And I'll just share a few thoughts about that before going on to the next reading, because there's a lot of nuance in that. These are the words of a writer who cared about writing. I mean, obviously any writer would care to some degree, but Swami Kriyananda cared a great deal. He would edit a page, a paragraph in his writing, in a book that he was writing, perhaps an article, a letter, an important letter, not just a personal letter, but I suppose he edited those frequently too. But he could edit something 50 times, even more, over and over and over again. And, you would think, wow, that must have taken months, years. Well, occasionally. I remember him working on a book that became kind of a series of little booklets. It was originally called Material Success Through Yoga Principles. And the title evolved in several different ways after that. Success and Happiness Through Yoga Principles is what it may be called now. But anyway, it evolved into 26 lessons that some of them are fairly chunky. And that took him a year and a half, give or take. We were fairly new in India at the time and going through all kinds of challenges, getting ourselves organized and set up, and he was involved in a lot of that. So he was not able to direct his attention full time to that, but he spent a lot of time on it. But other things, it's amazing. I mean, he wrote the essence of the Bhagavad Gita in 2 months, and it spent another 3 weeks or so editing it. But there have been times when he'd spend a year editing a book. So it really kind of depended on how fluidly it came out in the first place. I think part of the reason that the Material Success course took so long for him is that he really had to bring his mind into that reality. His was not a businessman's mind. He was capable of thinking that way when he needed to be. He was capable of generating lots of creative ideas. He was very successful in his way, but he was not a merchant. He was not a, maker of deals, and, that was not he was not looking for profit. That was not his motive. His motive was to help people. And so coming back to this little passage, he's saying, get to clarity. Do the work for your listener or your reader so that they are not sort of dragged along with you, going through the process, going through the brambles. Do the work of clearing the path for them. And then they can follow you. And so when he would write, he would get into this tremendous flow, and he could work for 16, 18 hours at a stretch, stopping very briefly just for meals or a walk or something. But otherwise he was just, put himself into this incredible flow. And then he would painstakingly go back through and methodically edit for clarity, for rhythm, for the musical elements. When he was writing something that was going to be used as a reading, as a kind of scriptural reference, he spent a long time trying to get it to flow right and have all those subtler, you might even say those were like the grace notes or the harmonics. He really worked on all of that aspect of it so that people could relate to it, so that they could hear it perhaps many times. We practice and share the Festival of Light every week. Those words have been read in more or less the same form. He did edit somewhat through the years, and again, once more toward the end of his life, just in the last year or so, he made a number of little tiny changes, just a few words here and there, which means he was basically satisfied with the whole thing after 35 years, which is really saying something. But he wanted people to be able to get more and more and more from that, to get closer and closer to the inspiration that he himself had. Convoluted sentences merely bewilder the mind. He was not about bewildering the mind. He wanted people's minds to get as much of what he was trying to say as possible. He had no use for trying to sound erudite or trying to sound high-flown. He was not about using big, complicated words. His vocabulary was amazing. He was always coming up with words that I had never heard. But he didn't use them to sort of dangle them over you like, see what I know. It was just if he wanted to express something extremely subtle or extremely nuanced, then he would look for the perfect word to communicate that. But otherwise, he tried for simplicity and clarity, and we can all learn from that example. The other thing that this passage highlights is that when you edit your words, you don't tend to speak in haste, and you tend to say what you do actually mean. How many times have we managed to offend somebody, perhaps completely without any idea that we did so, or just our words were mistaken, our words were misunderstood, and clarity, giving the time to achieve that kind of clarity will help prevent that. In today's reading, January 28th, he says, "Say only what you mean. In your most casual speech, be sincere, and you'll find others listening to you instead of gazing around in furtive search of a clock." And you just have to appreciate the sense of humor. He had been around just crushingly boring people in his life at different times, people who could just pontificate, expatiate, as if there was no such thing as time. And he just, there's another reading which I won't take the trouble to find right now, but I love it. It probably comes in June or July or something, but he says, "Say what you mean and then stop. Be satisfied with sufficiency." And it's a beautiful, marvelous, and a little bit humorous, yes, but it's really valuable. So I'm going to finish saying what I mean and then stop, which is learn to pay attention to what we communicate so that we communicate, yes, correct ideas, appropriate ideas that people can tune into, but also that we communicate the joy, the peace of our own being truly and sensitively. Because when we do that, people will get it. And that's what people listen in many ways a lot more to our body language and our expression, what vibration is coming through this person's body language, the look on their face. There's a lot of communication that happens with that. So you want that to all line up. You want to be true to the message that you're giving, and let your ideas and your vibration come through, and that comes through with clarity. God bless you.